Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. I am Richard Bann. As you can see, this is the beginning of the finishing touch. Note that Edgar Kennedy is billed here as Ed Kennedy as opposed to his 1928 directing screen credits on From Soup to Nuts and Your Darn Tootin', where it's the more impressive E. Livingston Kennedy. By the phrase "and finished in the first reader" on this first text title card, it tells us, without intending to, that we are viewing a descendant of the domestic camera negative as shot by George Stevens, who, along with Leo McCarey, are regarded as two of the finest film directors in the entire history of movies. Quote, "and finished in the first reader" was not the phrase used for the export negative, which, as always, was the second or lesser negative with slightly different camera angles, which was shot by Hal Roach's brother Jack, standing side by side with Stevens' camera. The corresponding phrase in the export neg reads "infants" instead of "first reader." Back to McCarey, given an unusual screen credit as supervising director, and it reflects the depth of his involvement in this picture, which assures us it's going to be a superior comedy with the boys really hitting their stride. And we have a continuity error here. After Stan unwittingly unloads those building materials, 2 shots later, they all vanish from behind the truck. Where'd they go? Now, there are so many things in this film with ties to Laurel and Hardy's other work. We see Sam Lufkin here as the prospective homeowner offering Laurel and Hardy, of all people, $500 to finish that house. The same year, we have the equally crazy Richard Carle offer the same $500 to the boys in habeas corpus to rob a grave. How do these people find the likes of Laurel and Hardy for such work, and vice versa? And with price level changes, $500 in 1928 is worth almost $9,000 in today's inflated money. Now, that huge house we see periodically in the background is still standing and can be found at 2839 Forester Drive. The finishing touch is the forerunner of several classic Laurel and Hardy shorts, where the two are workers, laborers, with tools and a physical task to complete, a job to do, which, as we know, they will always screw up, always. The whole show is their interaction, their relationship littered with a blizzard of gags afforded by so many props. Pure slapstick mayhem sight gags. Hog Wild, the music box, Toad in a Hole, Busy Bodies, and Dirty Work all have their roots in this great two-reeler, which in turn draws gags and elements from Babe Hardy's earlier solo Stick Around and Stan Laurel's earlier solos Smithy, the Egg, and the Noon Whistle. And there's maybe echoes of Max Davidson's more recent Call of the Cuckoo, too. Later, in his own series at RKO, Edgar Kennedy made a two-reeler called I'll Build It Myself, 1946, directed by Hal Yates, who had directed Hats Off and who remade parts of it in another Edgar Kennedy short, It's Your Move. Then the Three Stooges try to construct a house in the Sitter Downers, 1937. And for once, don't lift any gags from Laurel and Hardy. But the best comedy ever about erecting a house might be Buster Keaton's 1 Week, 1920. And here comes Dorothy Coburn, going to bark and loud at Kennedy the cop about the construction noise. She's a nurse at a sanitarium with a sign that reads, "For Nervous Wrecks," and another that says, "Quiet." In fact, it was and is today a private home which you can visit on any trip you make here to Laurel and Hardy Land at 2728 McConnell Drive in Cheviot Hills, near Culver City and between the Fox and MGM studios. In the film, it's supposed to be right across the street, but actually it's 3 blocks northeast of where Laurel and Hardy are working on this house. These movies, well, that's another good trick on us. There's this text title which must have generated a big laugh because Mr. Hardy says the same thing to the 2 little kids playing in Bratz. Today's Cheviot Hills is full of beautiful old homes, but as you can see here in 1928, there didn't seem to be but a few structures on the horizon yet in any direction. It's all wide open spaces just before blossoming quickly into a huge, fashionable, residential real estate development. So consequently, what is a cop doing there on his feet, walking a beat in what we see as a wasteland? He's there for this comedy is the answer. That's what he's doing there. Try and find a cop anywhere in LA today unless you're breaking the speed limit, but that's another issue. Anyhow, you've got the same situation in Bacon Grabbers, made the next year and just up the road at the new home of the studio's then just hired sound man, Elmer Regis. There's not another house nor any people in sight in any direction, yet there is Harry Bernard in Bacon Grabbers as a cop walking a beat, only in two real comedies, you see. What we're looking at here, this house, like the one in Hog Wild, was actually built by Hal Roach Studios carpenters, probably including Charlie Hall, whose other job around the lot besides acting was as a carpenter. He probably was on the construction crew for what we see. And here in some of these scenes, watch how Kennedy, as the script calls for, takes it big, and how. And coming up, here is a great gag, an otherworldly, cartoonish gag with that long board, and one which always generates big laughter. You can call it white magic, or Leo McCarey said it was a, quote, fantasy joke. We just couldn't resist doing it, he said. Of course, we know how it's done. We just can't see how it's done. 13 years later, Stan does the same thing with another endless plank in the otherwise not so great Great Guns. He did it first, as I recall, in 1923, making the Noon Whistle, working for the first time with Jimmy Finlayson. And you wonder how different the finishing touch might be if this house was owned by Mr. Finlayson instead of Mr. Lufkin. Then we have the gag hooking the bucket of nails, which maybe wouldn't work on a sound film because the noise would alert Stan to the bucket's location. So much of what he does in this film is simply perfection. In the cutting continuity, there's a phrase, and it's repeated several times to convey Stan being slow-witted. Quote, Stan doesn't know what it's all about, end quote, and seldom does. That says everything, doesn't it? Poor Stan, he always wins our sympathy because he seems so helplessly bewildered, like to the 10th power, and every kind of nails calamity befalls Mr. Hardy. He steps on them, he swallows them. Anyone working in construction, did you ever see someone carry nails around in his mouth? I mean, apart from the sanitary consideration, and Hardy keeps doing it. He never learns, time and again, swallowing a mouthful of nails. As carpenters, they're both incompetent, though Hardy, as always, believes otherwise. Pretty sure I know why Dorothy Coburn, Viola Richard, and Edna Marion left the studio when they did in mid-1928, but I don't want to speculate. Friends think because I was a close friend of Hal Roach for 25 years that I know everything, but I don't. I sure do not. The man did not live in the past, and he would indulge my film history inquiries only so far. And throwing the bucket through that window to hit Kennedy puts us in mind of a similar gag we see in Helpmates. Anyway, about the curvaceous Dorothy, or sometimes Dottie Coburn, who is 22 or 23 here, 5'4". Evidently she had red hair, and from the way she photographs, definitely blue eyes. The fiery Dorothy Coburn brightened 11 other Laurel and Hardy pictures. She was from Montana. Her family was in some way connected with ranching and early Poverty Row Western movies. Her uncle was Walt Coburn, whose pulp stories were adapted into many big and small Westerns, including The Westerner with Gary Cooper and The Back Trail, which we've run at the Lone Pine Film Festival, and Walter Brennan wrote the introduction to Coburn's memoirs. At a time when not many men finished even high school, much less women doing so, Dorothy Coburn graduated from Hollywood High on Sunset Boulevard near the Chaplin Studio, then went on to the University of Arizona, majoring in philosophy and minoring in languages. She lived for a time in the holy city of St. Paul, which I'd like to know more about because it's my hometown. I have the only still that shows Stan Laurel directing a movie. It's from Wise Guys Prefer Brunettes with Ted Healy of the Three Stooges, and it will appear in the book I'm trying to finish called Men of War Just Playing Together. That short has some aquatic scenes, and Roach needed someone to double Helene Chadwick's swimming and diving. So they hired the athletic Dorothy Coburn. That's how she got onto The Lot of Fun. Someone from the studio simply observed her daily swim in the Culver City community pool. When she left Roach after prominent roles in some of the best Max Davidson shorts, She continued doing stunts and stand-in work, reportedly for Ginger Rogers, though there was no mention of her in Rogers' autobiography. She lived into the late 1970s, but no one got to her for interviews. What might she have told us about being slapped on her rear end with a paintbrush by Stan Laurel in the second 100 years? Anyway, as for the business with the window, and there's a real change you can see by the wear on the reel's end, how would you rehearse an unpredictable sight gag like this? We know generally at this studio they got pretty much every scene on the first or second take, but here, I don't know, except to say this is brilliant physical skill, the way Stan tries to handle or actually manipulate the collapsing window frame into random scraps of wood. We take it for granted as we watch, but let anyone try to recreate this scene. And how many window frames would you need before it would collapse into pieces so gradually as we see here? Of course, later they have some fun with windows in busybodies, too. The way Stan portrays the minimum of brain power throughout this short, and considering his blank expression, his innocence, his simple purity, was he ever better? What he's doing here all throughout, this total incognizance, is impeccable. He suffers a panic attack when he believes he's lost a finger inside his gloved hand. This is a comedy genius at work, having at last found the right format and parameters for his evolving character, of course with a hat tip to Harry Langdon and Leo McCarey. And yet on April 24, 1928, 2 months after the finishing touch had been issued to theaters, he wrote a fan friend named Duncan Boss on, quote, Stan Laurel Comedy Stationery, saying, I note in your letters that you have been keeping in close touch with our comedies and am delighted to know that you like them so well. It certainly is encouraging, and your criticism is greatly appreciated. Very many thanks. Glad you liked the finishing touch. We were kind of disappointed with it here, felt that it wasn't up to our standard. Maybe it's good that we feel that way sometimes, makes us try to do better. Of course, we can't expect to make knockouts every time, especially as we make a picture in 8 to 10 days, and ideas for material don't come easy. So we must consider ourselves pretty lucky up to now. My vacation is nearly over. I return to work next Monday, April 30th, end quote. In his letter, Laurel says generally the pictures take 8 to 10 days, but the finishing touch took 15 days to finish. Production commenced and cameras first turned on December 2nd, 1927, and shooting continued through December 17th. And while they were making this film, Stan Laurel's daughter, Lois, was born on December 10th. And she always got a kick out of seeing this film for that reason. When it was finished, the finishing touch was issued to theaters as part of the All-Star series on February 25, 1928. The director was former sports writer Clyde Bruckman, who earned distinguished credits writing and directing terrific comedies starring Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, and W.C. Fields. However, his story thereafter is too depressing for any discussion here. But evidently it was Bruckman who was driving around past a partially finished house and suggested this narrative to McCarey and Roach. On the affidavit for the copyright registration, the author of the screenplay, usually just a contractual matter, was certified as being both Clyde Bruckman and Leo McCarey, which was unusual. Many of us first saw the finishing touch as an excerpt in Robert Youngson's Laurel and Hardy's Laughing Twenties in 1965. In the Laurel and Hardy book that Jack McCabe, Al Kilgore, and I did, we gave this short 3 derbies. Today, it holds up so well, and I'd rate it higher. We see a lot of slapstick violence here, as in So Much for Industrial Safety, where Kennedy and Hardy are the victims, but they were big, rugged, athletic men who could withstand this level of punishment without resorting to doubles. But boy, can they take it. Now we're looking at the world of late 1927. In only a few short years, residential development exploded here, creating what was quickly and remains today the beautiful upscale West Side community of Cheviot Hills. Many of the higher-paid Hal Roach Studios staffers built homes here, all near one another because the area was brand new and so close to the studio. Residents included Hal Roach's boyhood friend Matt O'Brien, H.M. Walker, Stan Laurel, Elmer Regas, and William Terhune, who owned the nearby Big Business House. And one block down and another over was the residence of Buster Keaton in the 1930s. In 2006, two sisters and their mother reopened and brought back to great prominence the Culver Hotel, which you see in so many Laurel and Hardy comedies. So Sons of the Desert founding member Chuck McCann and I inaugurated weekly luncheons to support the place because Hal Roach Studios history speaks to us there. My route from Beverly Hills takes me all across Motor Avenue from Fox to MGM, and every week I go right by all these homes and filming locations I've named, which I acknowledge each time by figuratively genuflecting as I drive. Always makes me smile, unless I cause an accident. The intersection of Motor and Club features a stoplight today, and that is where the Finishing Touch house was. Today, if you stand in front of that stoplight, you are on the spot where many, if not most, of the camera setups were chosen. And today, all the homes on Motor face that street, but the Finishing Touch house faced Club on the space which is now 2826 Motor Avenue. The area today looks absolutely nothing, and I do mean nothing, like what we are viewing here. I wish I knew the reason why Stax Graves shot so many behind-the-scenes candid or posed publicity photos during this shoot. They're all great, showing the boys having lunch, looks like milk and sandwiches, frolicking with Dorothy Coburn, playing with her on a teeter-totter, Babe Hardy listening to his large RCA Radiola portable radio, posing with cameras, cats, and Stan Laurel's St. Bernard dog brought from home named Lady. I'm fortunate to have about 50 stills from this film, many of these signed by Stan Laurel himself. One in particular that will appear in the Men of War book had Stan writing dialogue for himself and his partner on the still, in quotes, as in a fantastic single-panel cartoon. And it demonstrates how this man's fertile mind was always and everywhere, seeing comedy situations in everything he did. For the film's conclusion, the bird, the cartoon sparrow that flies up and lands on the chimney, toppling it and triggering a domino destruction effect, that's animation provided by Roy Seawright. Before he was producing decades of cartoons at Universal, Walter Lantz said he had been on the lot of fun, only 6 weeks while Flying Elephants and Hats Off were being made, but he was gone before the finishing touch. If Lantz had stayed longer, would the little bird we see be Walter Lantz's creation, Woody Woodpecker? The way this picture was supposed to end, according to props and set designer Thomas Benton Roberts, they planned for the truck to destroy everything by plowing all the way through the back of the house. But the construction crew couldn't or wouldn't follow his instructions, so the truck gets stuck in the middle. Roberts said Stan Laurel was philosophical about the misfire, but if we didn't know this, would we think it was a misfire? And by the way, the 3-sheet poster gives away the ending. So in 1928, if you're walking into the theater or through the lobby and that huge 3-sheet is on display, you know what's going to happen. And the Roach Brain Trust must have had this scene in mind because it does play so well when they fashion the conclusion of Toad in a Hole, where the helpful Mr. Laurel suggests, why don't you put the sail up? And the gag where Stones knock hats off was reworked with variations for both Birthmarks and Swiss Miss. Now, we can't see him, nor can we hear him, but we have to imagine that for some of these 15 days on location, Leo McCarey was there, standing off camera in so many of these scenes all throughout shooting, exhorting both Babe Hardy and Edgar Kennedy to, quote, just hold on it now, don't even move, as the payoff to some of these slapstick indignities. Then Hardy plays to the camera, topping the gag with his plea to us for understanding and sympathy. And of course, Kennedy was the master of the slow burn. Great stuff. What always struck me about this keep-away scene where they're trying to keep the $500 away from Sam Lufkin, they go into football formation, throw the $500 back and forth, remindful of what they did in Way Out West, passing that deed back and forth, even kicking or punting the money. But you really can't do that very well with paper money, can you? And then Hardy pauses from all the retaliatory action like he's taking a break from this orgy of destruction, or maybe he thought they had stopped shooting. Notice, too, how most of the supposed rocks are bouncing all over the place. Anyway, I think it's a great, great comedy, still underrated. And on the right here in a moment, you're going to see that's Motor Avenue on the way to the future big business house and Stan Laurel's real-life residence at Motor and Glen Bar. And across the screen, sloping up from left to right, that's Club, where the stoplight is today. Well, I'm glad that's all cleared up. So until next time, I'm Richard Bann saying this was, indeed, The Finishing Touch. Hope you enjoyed it.